Alright, this is the final installment of our countdown of the Belgian Metal Alphabet. I hope you are ready. Let's play some metal. Welcome to the channel, everybody. I am Belgian Jasper, and I am back to play some Belgian metal today. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Alright, so this is the fifth and final video in my series on the Belgian Metal Alphabet. We started a few videos ago with the letter Z, and we're working our way down to A, and in this video we are going to cover bands that start with E, D, C, B, and A. And don't forget, on July 21st is the Belgian national holiday. On that day I will publish a video with my top 10 picks of best metal songs of all time. Alright, let's get started with this overview. We are going to start with the letter E. I'm actually going to start with a band that I wouldn't necessarily call traditional metal. It's more speed rock with a lot of 70s hard rock influences and early 80s new wave of British heavy metal influences. This is El Guapo, Stuntteam. I bet you heard some Iron Maiden influences in that song. It sounds a lot like Phantom of the Opera. This song is Battles Across the Stereo Spectrum, which is the title track of one of their albums. My favorite album is probably the following album called Accusation Blues, but this song is just so much fun, so I had to pick this one. Alright, moving on to a legendary yet very much underground band of the 80s speed metal scene in Belgium. This band is called Explorer, and they really only released a few demos, I think maybe one EP, and in particular their first demo, which is called Burn the Witches, is a well sought after demo still today. It made a lot of waves back in the day with the thrashing and speed metal scene that was rising across the world through the tape trading. And from that demo, I would recommend you check out the song Burn the Witches. Burn the witches! Alright, let's keep it going with something completely different. I've not had a single ballad in all of these videos. So maybe it's time to slow things down a little bit and just, play this really beautiful song called Fantasmagoria by the metal project called Epysode. You decided to turn off your inner light. So Epysode is a project by Samuel Arkan. I probably butchered that last name, but I apologize, Sam. So Epysode is very much a metal opera project in the style of an Avantasia. So far there's been 2 albums, and Sam has been successful in bringing all these renowned musicians and singers to Belgium to record these cool albums. So if you like these metal operas, I would highly recommend you check out Epysode. Alright, so going from a power ballad to some extreme metal, it is time for one of the biggest icons of Belgian black metal. This is Enthroned. So Enthroned came on the scene in the early 90s, 1994. They released a ton of albums, and over the years, there were a lot of lineup changes, so today there's not a single original member, as far as I know, in the band anymore. And so die-hard Enthroned fans are probably a little annoyed with me that I actually chose a newer song. Some people might say that the current band is no longer the real Enthroned, and they have a point, but I actually find that their new albums are really good. So definitely check out the 2014 album Sovereign, and in particular check out the song Of Feathers and Flames. Alright, so we are at my first top pick of this video. So for the letter E, who did I choose? Well, I actually went with a more newer band. The band's been around for about 10 years now. Released a few albums and an EP that was really good. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this band is one of the best speed metal bands in the world today. The band that I'm talking about is Evil Invaders, and definitely check out their EP from 2016 called In For The Kill, which has this phenomenal speed metal anthem on it called Raising Hell. Through the darkness, no one going back. The past only behind me, got the devil in my neck. Kick the bell, I love, it lost me's my need. Ain't no fear of nothing, always built for speed. So yeah, Evil Invaders, obviously a call out to the classic album by Razor, a Canadian speed metal band. And for those of you who don't know, I live in Canada, even though I'm Belgium. I moved here 8 years ago. And so Evil Invaders is kind of like a fun little, connection between Belgium and Canada for me. Alright, moving on to the D. Wait, that came out wrong. Next up, the letter D. Alright, let's just smash through the walls with my first pick. This band is Belgium's most iconic hardcore band. This band is called Deviate. Alright, Deviate, classic 90s hardcore band, and the song that I picked is Last Judgement, which is off their 1997 classic Thorn of the Living, and this song is definitely one of their bigger hits. Fun fact, Freddie Christian, or Freddie Madball, the singer of the, New York Legends Madball, sings along on this track. Alright, I'm gonna stay in the world of hardcore, although this is a bit of a hardcore, metalcore mix, some thrash influences in there as well for sure. This is a really cool band, Do or Die. I really like the early 2000s albums of Do or Die, and particularly The Meaning of Honor in 2002, and on that album you'll find my favorite song called Ultimatum. Alright, let's keep it going. My next pick for the letter D is a band that I would say plays a proggy, melodic, heavy metal. This band is called Dyscordia, and they are actually getting quite popular these days. They released a new album not too long ago, but I haven't really explored that one just yet. So far I would still recommend their song Chthonic Star from 2016, which I like a lot. Alright, I know you can't really see much of my battle vest, but there's a lot of thrash metal patches on here, and including some bands that don't take themselves too seriously. I do like bands that just want to party once in a while. Belgium has a band that fits that description perfectly. This is a band called Devastation, and you definitely want to check out their song Defilement. Alright, so we're at my favorite pick for the letter D. This is a band called Diablo Blvd, which is a modern heavy metal band. Unfortunately, a few years ago, the band decided to call it quits after a number of successful albums. Their 2014 album, Fall of the Deadlights, was actually my least favorite album, but at the same time, it contained my favorite song of the band called Rise Like Lions. Well, the needs of the many are down. So in Belgium, Diablo Blvd definitely had a head start when it comes to breaking through into the mainstream. They definitely got more radio play than some other bands starting out, and that is because the singer of this band, Alex Agnew, was one of the biggest Belgian stand-up comedians. At the same time, it must be a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I definitely remember going to shows where there were a bunch of people there that were kind of hoping it would be a stand-up comedy show with some music in between, and that was definitely not what this band was all about. So yeah, the band definitely got some early momentum. At the same time, I could understand that it could be also pretty annoying that people expect you to just be the funny guy. We are on a roll. Let's go into the letter C, and we are going to start with the best Belgian thrash metal band from the 80s. This is Cyclone. So Cyclone released only 2 albums in the 80s. The band reunited recently. I hope more new music will come out of that reunion. But in the 80s, there was definitely some buzz and momentum around this band, and unfortunately some label issues kind of held them back. But their 86 debut album called Brutal Destruction is one of those underground gems that you really want to look at if you like 80s thrash metal. My favorite song on that album is called In the Grip of Evil. Alright, from the 80s, let's now move it to the 90s, early 2000s. I'm pretty sure in every video in this series I've mentioned the 8000 hardcore scene in Western Flanders. Well, arguably the best and biggest band to come out of that scene is the band called Congress. They kind of fell apart. They came back in 2004 with the album Resurrection, and surprisingly enough, that has become my favorite Congress album of all time. And in particular, the title track is really worth checking out. Alright, let's go back to newer bands. There are some really cool extreme metal bands in Belgium, and one of the best examples these days is the death metal band called Carnation.
In the chapel of the Borax, with the visions of misery, the pulse of nature.
When this band entered the scene, it was like a meteor hit the earth. They released their debut album in 2018 called Chapel of Abhorrence, and this album was hailed worldwide as one of the best death metal albums of the year. And I'm not joking, there are people in Canada talking about how great this new Belgian band was. If you want to check them out, I suggest you listen to the title track of that album. In previous videos, we referenced the big three of 80s heavy metal in Belgium. We had Ostrogoth, we had Killer. Well, now it's time for number 3 in that list, the band Crossfire. Unlike those other bands, Crossfire only released 2 albums, and my favorite one is actually their second album, aptly named Second Attack. On that album, I recommend you listen to Atomic War, which is just this absolute speed metal rager. So which band is my top pick for the letter C? I don't think anybody that knows just a little bit of Belgian metal is going to be surprised with my pick. This is arguably the most successful metal band to come out of Belgium. This band is called Channel Zero. So Channel Zero was the perfect band for the 90s in Belgium. They definitely had some thrashy influences, but very much like a Sepultura and Pantera evolved over the 90s to include more alternative and predominantly groove metal influences. Channel Zero did the same thing, and they were just the right band at the right time. This band had several radio hits in Belgium, but how could I pick any other song than the iconic Black Fuel? Alright, 2 letters to go. Let's kick it off for the letter B. We've had a mixed bag of bands so far, most of them quite serious bands, so maybe it's time for some comedic relief. My first pick for the letter B is Belgian Asociality with the song Morgen. So Belgian Asociality is a humoristic hardcore band from the 90s. They did a few reunions later on as well, but in Belgium they're mostly known for their 90s material. And the song Morgen, which translates into tomorrow, is the ultimate procrastinator's anthem. Basically the band is just saying over and over that all that stuff they have to do, they'll do it tomorrow. Because if they do it today, then why would you still have tomorrow? And that is a good point. Alright, from the 90s, let's go back into the 80s. This is another one of those bands that is an underground gem. This band is called Bad Lizard, and they play a combo of heavy and power metal. In particular, check out their song Black Hole. You know I live my life like a candle in a wind. Don't give a chance to enemies. Be clever and watch out. Don't do things alone. Alright, I want to invite you on a virtual journey to my home city of Antwerp. People in Antwerp just call it the city. Most Belgians outside of the city don't like Antwerpians that much. Apparently we're arrogant. We don't really care. We tend to say in Antwerp, but Antwerp is a city and everything else is parking lot. Anyway, all joking aside, there's some really good bands coming out of the Antwerp scene, and the first band that I want to call out, unfortunately decided to call it quits a few years ago. This band is called Blixen, which is the Dutch word for lightning, and I would recommend you check out their debut album called Face the Evil, and in particular, the title track of that album. The streets I wander day and night, as a search of braveries they victimize, feel no regret, oh I feel. We're staying in Antwerp for the next band. This is a much newer band, and this band just makes this really fun mix of some thrash metals, some sludge metals, some groove metals, some death metal, and they just pour a lot of rock and roll over it. This band is called Bark, and you should definitely check out their song Voice of Dog. Okay, so switching gears a little bit to a very different kind of band as my top pick for the letter B. This is a post-hardcore band that has become pretty popular in recent years. In fact, I had never heard of this band until recently because they only really broke through after I moved to Canada. This is actually a cool three-piece with female vocals, and the singer is also the drummer at the same time. This band is called Brutus, and I would highly recommend their breakthrough song, All Along. We made it to the final letter in this series. It is time for the letter A. In every video that I've done, there was at least one member of the so-called Church of Ra, which is a music artist collective that is centered around one band in particular called Amun-Ra. So Amun-Ra brings this atmospheric mix of post-core with some sludge, and there's some blackened elements in there and lots of doom as well. When you go to one of their shows, they really take you on this immersive journey that can sometimes be quite challenging, and their show feels more like a mass, and they actually call their albums always masses as well. And so it's easy to see where this concept of the Church of Rock comes from, because it almost feels like a cult around this band, which brings us this hauntingly beautiful music. Alright, staying with iconic bands, this band is a little older again, although they're still around. This is a black metal band called Ancient Rites. So Ancient Rites was definitely a black metal pioneer, not just in Belgium, but in Europe. And over time, the band included more folk and pagan influences as well. Their 1998 album Fatherland still stands as one of their biggest classics, and the title track of that song is also one of their most famous songs. Right, let's go back to the early 80s for a really fun band, a band that released a couple of demos and EPs and even 2 albums in the year 1983. This band is called Acid. Even today, Acid remains this underground fan favorite. I do believe the band reunited recently and made a comeback. I haven't heard new music yet. I hope that is coming at some point. My favorite song of Acid is Hell on Wheels from their second album. Right, in the early 90s, a new speed thrash metal band was created called After All, and they are still going strong. They have released 8 albums, and my favorite album is from 2012 called Dawn of Enforcer, and I would highlight the song Parasite Within.
No power, no control, all splendors revealed in time, twisted spectators bring you death, suffer.
Alright, the final band in my overview of the heavy metal alphabet of Belgium. It is the death metal pride of Belgium. This band came out in the second wave of death metal in the later 90s. They've released 10 albums and a bunch of other stuff. When you're looking on a global scale, this is likely the most successful Belgian metal band. This band is called Aborted. So like I said, Aborted has been around for quite some time, and they are definitely well known outside of Belgium's borders. It's really hard for me to determine what is my favorite album, but I highlighted their latest album called Terror Vision. On that album you have Vespertine Decay, which is just this anthem that I absolutely love, and I think it's pretty amazing that the band is still producing such quality death metal. Alright, that was it. A lot of big Belgian bands in this overview, but if I missed out any bands that you were hoping to see, leave me a note in the comments and I will check them out. Don't forget, in a few days it is the Belgian national holiday, and I will be posting my top 10 of the best Belgian metal songs of all time, so keep your eyes open for that. Hey, thank you for watching this video on Belgian Metal. Click right here if you want to see more content, like it, and subscribe to the channel.